The locker room door slammed shut. Its echo a gunshot in Ethan Caldwell's ears. He stood frozen, the weight of his teammates' jeers still burning his skin. Their words faggot, freak carved into his heart like graffiti on a crumbling wall. At 18, he dreamed of leading Willow Creek High's football team to state. But now, in the dim light of a Texas autumn, he was nothing but an outcast. Ethan's hands trembled as he gripped his duffel bag, the scent of sweat and leather lingering like a ghost of the life he'd lost. He'd been the star quarterback, the golden boy of Willow Creek, a small town where Friday night lights were religion and the team was its clergy. But one whispered confession to his best friend, Jamie, about loving a boy from the rival team, had unraveled everything. By morning, the rumor had spread like wildfire, and Coach Harlan's verdict was swift: "We don't need your kind here." Stripped of his jersey, Ethan was left to walk home alone, the town's eyes boring into him like nails. He didn't cry, not then. Instead, he stopped at the edge of the football field, staring at the bleachers where he'd once been cheered. The scoreboard flickered, a relic of the town's pride, and he made a silent vow: "I'll come back." Not as their hero, but as something they can't ignore. That night, under a sky bruised with stars, Ethan packed a bag and left Willow Creek, chasing a dream bigger than the town's small-mindedness. 10 years later, Ethan Caldwell was no longer the scrawny kid with a broken heart. At 28, he was a rising architect in Chicago, his designs gracing skylines from Seattle to Miami. His firm, Horizon Designs, had a reputation for bold, human-centered architecture buildings that told stories. Ethan's own story, though, he kept locked away, buried beneath sketches and steel. He hadn't returned to Willow Creek since the day he'd left, but the past had a way of pulling him back. The call came on a rainy Tuesday. "Mr. Caldwell," the voice on the phone said, "Willow Creek needs a new stadium. The old one's falling apart, and we hear you're the best." Ethan's stomach twisted. The man on the line was Mayor Tompkins, a name he vaguely remembered from high school, a man who'd clapped for him on the field but stayed silent when he was ousted. Ethan wanted to hang up, to let Willow Creek rot with its outdated scoreboard and peeling paint. But something, maybe pride, maybe vengeance, made him pause. "I'll consider it," Ethan said, his voice steady but cold. He hung up and stared out his office window, the Chicago skyline glinting like a promise kept. He thought of Jamie, his old friend, who'd stood by him when the team turned their backs. Jamie had stayed in Willow Creek, running a small auto shop, still tethered to the town's rhythms. Ethan hadn't spoken to him in years, but the memory of his loyalty burned bright. If Ethan took this job, it wouldn't just be about a stadium, it would be about proving something. He flew to Texas the next week, stepping onto Willow Creek soil for the first time in a decade. The town looked smaller, its Main Street diner still serving greasy burgers, its church steeple still piercing the sky. The high school field was a ghost of itself: rusted goalposts, cracked bleachers, a scoreboard that hadn't worked in years. Ethan met Mayor Tompkins and a committee of town officials, including Coach Harlan, now grayer but still broad-shouldered, his eyes narrowing when he saw Ethan. "You've done well for yourself," Harlan said, his tone clipped, as if Ethan's success was an inconvenience. "Didn't expect you back." Ethan smiled thinly. Didn't expect to be invited. The tension was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the past neither dared to voice. The committee outlined their vision: a state-of-the-art stadium to revive Willow Creek's fading football glory. Ethan listened, sketching in his notebook, but his mind was elsewhere, in the boy he'd loved, on the team that had betrayed him, on the chance to rewrite his story. That evening, Ethan drove to Jamie's auto shop, a squat building on the edge of town. Jamie was there, wiping grease from his hands, his face lighting up when he saw Ethan. At 28, Jamie was still wiry, his black hair cropped short, his grin as warm as ever. "You look like a city boy now," Jamie teased, pulling Ethan into a hug. They sat on the shop's porch, sipping beers, the air thick with memories. "You're really gonna build their stadium?" Jamie asked, his voice soft but probing. "After what they did?" Ethan stared at the horizon, where the sun bled into the hills. "I'm not doing it for them," he said. "I'm doing it for me. And maybe for us." Jamie's eyes held his, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. Ethan hadn't come out to anyone else in Willow Creek back then, but Jamie had always known and never flinched. Over the next few weeks, Ethan threw himself into the project. He designed a stadium that was more than a sports venue. It was a monument to resilience. Curved steel beams mimicked the arc of a perfect pass, while open-air seating invited the community to gather, not just for games, but for connection. He poured his heart into every detail. From the eco-friendly materials to the memorial plaque he planned for the entrance, honoring all who were cast out but never gave up. But Willow Creek wasn't ready to let go of its old ways. Whispers followed Ethan, some proud, some vicious. At a town hall meeting, a parent stood up, his voice dripping with disdain. "Why should we trust some outsider who abandoned us?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "I didn't abandon Willow Creek," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 10 years. "Willow Creek abandoned me." The room fell silent, and for the first time, Ethan felt the tide shift. Some nodded, others looked away, but the truth hung heavy in the air. Jamie, sitting in the back, gave him a small, proud smile. Ethan knew then that this wasn't just about a building, it was about forcing a town to face its past. As the weeks turned to months, Ethan and Jamie grew closer, their old friendship rekindling into something deeper. Late nights at the shop turned into long talks about dreams, regrets, and the future. Jamie confessed he'd never left Willow Creek because he felt he owed it to the kids who came after them, the ones who might face the same hate Ethan had. "Someone's got to stay and fight," Jamie said, his voice breaking. Ethan reached for his hand, and for the first time since high school, he didn't pull away. The stadium project gained momentum, but so did the resistance. A group of locals, led by a former teammate, started a petition to halt construction, claiming Ethan's lifestyle tainted the town's values. The petition stung, but Ethan refused to back down. He met with the committee, presenting his final designs, a stadium that would put Willow Creek on the map, drawing tourists and revenue. "You can hate me," he told them, "but you can't hate progress." The vote was close, but the project was approved. Ethan stood on the construction site, watching cranes lift steel beams into place, his vision taking shape. Jamie was there, too, his presence a quiet anchor. As the sun set over the half-built stadium, Ethan felt a flicker of hope, not just for himself, but for the town that had once rejected him. The cranes clawed at the Texas sky, their steel arms weaving Ethan's vision into reality. Each beam that rose over Willow Creek's new stadium felt like a defiance of the past, a middle finger to the town that had once spat him out. But even as the structure took shape, Ethan felt the weight of eyes on him, some curious, some hostile, all waiting for him to falter. Construction was grueling, not just because of the Texas heat, but because of the whispers that followed Ethan everywhere. At the diner, locals stared over their coffee cups, murmuring about the city boy who thought he could waltz back and change their town. Ethan ignored them, focusing on the blueprints spread across his motel room desk. He designed the stadium to be a beacon, modern, inclusive, a place where everyone could belong. But belonging in Willow Creek, he was learning, came with a fight. Jamie became his refuge. They met most evenings at the auto shop, where Jamie would tinker with engines while Ethan sketched. One night, as cicadas hummed outside, Jamie tossed a wrench onto the workbench and turned to Ethan. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd stayed?" he asked, his voice low. Ethan looked up, his pencil pausing. "Every day?" he admitted. "But staying would have killed me." Jamie nodded, his eyes tracing the scars of their shared past. "I stayed because I thought I could change things. Be there for the next kid like you." He hesitated, then added, "I always wondered if I should have gone with you." The air between them thickened, charged with unspoken questions. Ethan wanted to reach out, to close the gap, but fear a ghost from his teenage years held him back. The stadium project hit its first major snag when the petition against Ethan gained traction. Led by Derek, a former teammate who'd once been Ethan's wide receiver, the group called themselves Willow Creek Values. Their flyers, plastered on telephone poles, didn't name Ethan directly but hinted heavily, "Our town deserves a leader who shares our morals." Ethan tore one down on his way to the site, his hands shaking with rage. He wasn't that scared kid anymore, but the words still cut. At the next town hall, Derek stood, his voice booming. "This stadium's supposed to represent us," he said, glaring at Ethan. "Not some outsider's agenda." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Ethan stood, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "This stadium isn't about me," he said. "It's about giving Willow Creek something to be proud of, a place for everyone, not just the ones you approve of." A few clapped, including a teenage girl in the front row, her eyes bright with defiance. Ethan later learned her name was Mia, a junior at Willow Creek High, openly queer and unafraid. She'd started a small LGBTQ+ club at school, a bold move in a town where such things were still whispered about. Ethan saw himself in her, and it fueled him to keep going. The construction site became a battleground. Someone spray-painted "Go Home" on a concrete pillar, and Ethan found himself scrubbing it off at dawn, his jaw clenched. Jamie showed up with coffee and a rag, helping in silence. "They're scared," Jamie said finally. "You're forcing them to look at themselves." Ethan nodded. But the vandalism soon a reminder that Willow Creek's heart hadn't fully changed. As the stadium's skeleton rose, so did Ethan's resolve. He worked late into the night, refining designs, meeting with contractors, and ensuring every detail was perfect. The memorial plaque he'd envisioned, a tribute to outcasts, became his obsession. He wanted it to stand at the entrance, etched in bronze, a quiet rebellion against the town's past. But when he presented the idea to the committee, Coach Harlan scoffed. "We don't need your sob story on our stadium," he said. Ethan held his gaze. "It's not my story. It's the town's." The tension with Harlan wasn't just personal, it was a microcosm of Willow Creek's struggle. The coach represented the old guard, clinging to tradition, while Ethan embodied change. At a community fundraiser for the stadium, Harlan cornered him. "You think you're better than us now, don't you?" he said, his breath heavy with whiskey. Ethan didn't flinch. "I think I'm better than who I was when I left. That's enough." Jamie, watching from across the room, stepped in, his presence a quiet shield. "Let's go, Ethan," he said, his hand brushing Ethan's arm. The touch lingered, and for a moment, the crowded gymnasium faded away. Ethan felt the pull again, that unspoken something that had always simmered between them. But before he could say anything, Mia approached, her voice cutting through the noise. "Mr. Caldwell, I love what you're doing," she said. "It's giving kids like me hope." Ethan smiled, his chest tightening with purpose. The weeks blurred into a rhythm of work and resistance. Ethan and Jamie grew inseparable, their bond deepening with every shared laugh and late-night confession. One evening, as they sat on the hood of Jamie's truck, watching the stadium's floodlights flicker on for the first time, Ethan took a risk. "I never thanked you," he said, his voice soft, "for staying by me back then." Jamie looked at him, his eyes reflecting the lights. "I'd do it again," he said. "Always." Ethan's heart raced. He leaned closer, their shoulders brushing, and for the first time, he let himself imagine a future where he didn't have to hide. But the moment was cut short by a phone call. Mayor Tompkins. "Urgent. We've got a problem," he said. "The petition's gone to the state level. They're threatening to pull funding." Ethan's stomach dropped. The stadium, his redemption. His legacy was at risk. He looked at Jamie, then at the half-built structure glowing against the night sky. "I'm not giving up," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Not this time." The threat to pull funding hit like a linebacker's tackle, knocking the wind out of Ethan's plans. The state's review board, swayed by Derek's petition, questioned whether Willow Creek Stadium was overambitious for a small town. But Ethan knew the real issue. His name was attached to it. He sat in his motel room, staring at financial projections, the weight of the past decade pressing down on him. He hadn't come this far to lose. Ethan called a meeting with the committee, laying out the numbers. The stadium would boost local business, draw tourists, and create jobs. "This isn't just about football," he said, his voice steady despite the doubt in the room. "It's about giving Willow Creek a future." Mayor Tompkins nodded, but Coach Harlan crossed his arms, unconvinced. "Sounds like you're selling us a dream we can't afford," he said. Ethan met his stare. "You can't afford to stay stuck in the past." Outside the meeting, Mia was waiting, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "I heard about the funding," she said. "You're not giving up, right?" Her earnestness reminded Ethan of himself at her age, defiant, hopeful, scared. "Not a chance," he told her, and her smile was a spark that kept him going. Ethan and Jamie brainstormed ways to save the project. Jamie suggested a crowdfunding campaign, tapping into social media to share Ethan's story not just as an architect, but as a kid who'd been kicked out and came back stronger. Ethan hesitated. He'd spent years guarding his past. But Jamie's hand on his arm, steady and warm, convinced him. "People need to know who you are," Jamie said, "not just what you build." They launched the campaign that night, posting a video of Ethan walking the construction site, explaining his vision, a stadium for everyone, a place where no one would be turned away. He didn't mention his expulsion directly, but the subtext was clear. The video spread beyond Willow Creek, catching the eye of progressive bloggers and local news. Donations trickled in $50 here, $100 there, mostly from strangers moved by Ethan's resilience. But Willow Creek's old guard pushed back harder. Derek organized a protest outside the site. A dozen locals waving signs, "Keep our values." Ethan watched from the construction trailer, his jaw tight. Jamie stood beside him, his presence a quiet anchor. "They're loud, but they're not the majority anymore," Jamie said. Ethan wanted to believe him, but the signs felt like a punch to the gut. The turning point came unexpectedly. At a high school football game played on the old, crumbling field, Mia took the microphone during halftime. She was nervous, her voice shaking, but she spoke clearly. "This town deserves a stadium that welcomes everyone," she said. "Ethan Caldwell's giving us that. He was one of us, and he's still fighting for us." The crowd was split. Some cheered, others booed, but her courage shifted something. A few parents approached Ethan after the game, offering quiet support. "Didn't know what happened to you back then," one said. That wasn't right. The crowdfunding campaign gained momentum, bolstered by Mia's speech going viral on social media. Donations poured in, enough to cover the funding gap. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. But the fight wasn't over. The state board scheduled a final hearing, and Ethan knew he'd have to face them in Austin. He spent days preparing, refining his pitch, while Jamie helped him practice. "You've got this," Jamie said, his eyes steady. "You're not that kid anymore." The night before the hearing, Ethan and Jamie sat on the construction site, the stadium's frame glowing under floodlights. Ethan confessed something he'd buried for years. "I was in love with him," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The boy from the rival team. His name was Lucas." Jamie listened, his face soft with understanding. "I never told anyone but you," Ethan added. Jamie reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "You don't have to carry that alone anymore," he said. The hearing in Austin was a gauntlet. Derek and his group were there, arguing that Ethan's personal agenda didn't align with Willow Creek's values. Ethan stood before the board, his heart pounding but his voice clear. "This stadium isn't about me," he said. "It's about a town learning to be better than it was. I'm proof that you can survive being cast out and come back to build something lasting." He presented his designs, the crowdfunding success, and testimonials from supporters like Mia. The board deliberated for hours, then approved the funding. Back in Willow Creek, the stadium's construction accelerated. Ethan and Jamie celebrated quietly, sharing a beer on Jamie's porch. "You did it," Jamie said, his grin wide. Ethan shook his head. "We did it." Their eyes locked. And this time, Ethan didn't pull away. He leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was tentative, then certain, a promise of something new. But the victory was bittersweet. As the stadium neared completion, Ethan found another vandalized pillar, this time with a slur scrawled in red paint. He stared at it, his chest tight, until Jamie arrived with a can of paint thinner. "They're losing," Jamie said, handing him a rag. "That's why they're loud." Together, they erased the hate. But Ethan knew the real work changing hearts would take longer. The stadium skeleton was nearly complete, its steel curves glinting under the Texas sun like a promise kept. Ethan walked the site daily, checking progress. But the vandalism lingered in his Minda reminder that Willow Creek's acceptance was fragile. He threw himself into the work, finalizing the memorial plaque's design for those who were cast out but never stopped building. It was subtle, but it carried his truth. Jamie was his constant now, their relationship evolving beyond friendship. They didn't label it, didn't need to. Late nights at the auto shop turned into mornings at Ethan's motel, their connection a quiet rebellion against the town's old wounds. But Ethan felt the clock ticking once the stadium was done. He'd have to decide whether to stay or return to Chicago. The town was changing. Slowly. Mia's LGBTQ+ club grew, drawing a handful of kids who found courage in her defiance. At a community event, a local pastor, once a silent bystander, approached Ethan. "I was wrong to stay quiet back then," he said, his voice heavy. "Your work's making us better." Ethan nodded, surprised by the apology. But it didn't erase the past. It only made him more determined to finish what he'd started. Derek's group hadn't given up. They shifted tactics, spreading rumors that Ethan's firm was cutting corners, inflating costs. The lies stung, but Ethan countered with transparency, posting budgets online and inviting locals to tour the site. A few took him up on it, including a former teammate, Ryan, who'd stayed neutral back in high school. "Didn't realize how bad it was for you," Ryan said, kicking at the dirt. "I should have said something." Ethan shrugged. "You're here now?" The stadium's grand opening was set for the fall, coinciding with the first football game of the season. Ethan worked tirelessly, ensuring every detail was perfect: the locker rooms, the press box, the eco-friendly lighting. He wanted the town to see what he'd built, not just for them, but for himself. The memorial plaque was installed at the entrance, its bronze surface gleaming. Ethan traced the words with his finger, feeling a weight lift. But tension simmered. At a final town hall, Derek stood again, this time with a new angle. The stadium's inclusive design was erasing tradition. He pointed to the plaque, calling it a political statement. Ethan's patience snapped. That plaque is for anyone who's ever been told they don't belong, he said, his voice ringing. If that threatens you, maybe you're the one who doesn't fit here anymore. The room erupted, some cheering, others shouting, but Ethan felt a shift. The tide was turning. Mia organized a rally for the stadium, drawing supporters from neighboring towns. Ethan watched, amazed, as queer kids and allies waved signs, "Build for all." Jamie stood beside him, their hands brushing, no longer hiding. "You're changing this place," Jamie said. Ethan shook his head. "You and Mia are. I'm just building the stage." The night before the opening, Ethan and Jamie walked the empty stadium, its seats gleaming under the floodlights. "You ever think about staying?" Jamie asked, his voice soft. Ethan hesitated. Chicago was his life, now his career, his freedom. But Willow Creek held something Chicago never could. "Jamie, I'm thinking about it," Ethan admitted, his heart racing. Jamie's smile was enough for now. The grand opening dawned bright and chaotic. Crowds filled the new bleachers, their cheers echoing as the Willow Creek Wildcats took the field. Ethan stood at the entrance, beside the plaque, watching families pour in. Some thanked him, others avoided his gaze. But the stadium was a living testament to resilience. Mia found him, her grin wide. "You did this," she said. Ethan shook his head. "We did." As the game began, Ethan and Jamie sat in the stands, their shoulders touching. The scoreboard lit up, no longer a relic but a symbol of progress. Ethan felt a lump in his throat, not just for the stadium, but for the boy he'd been, the one who'd walked away vowing to return. He ate on his terms. But the night wasn't perfect. Derek and a few others lingered outside, their signs smaller but still there. Ethan ignored them, focusing on the game, on Jamie's hand in his. The past wasn't gone, but it didn't own him anymore. He'd built something that would outlast the hate, something that would stand for generations. The stadium's first game was a triumph, the crowd's roar filling Ethan with a pride he hadn't expected. The Willow Creek Wildcats won 34-17, and the new scoreboard glowed, a beacon of the town's renewed spirit. But as Ethan stood by the memorial plaque, watching families leave, he knew the real victory wasn't the score, it was the fact that this place existed at all. The weeks after the opening brought a mix of praise and pushback. Local papers ran stories about the stadium's eco-friendly design and economic promise, some even mentioning Ethan's past with cautious respect. But online, Derek's group kept the fire burning, posting about traditional values and calling the plaque an insult. Ethan ignored them, focusing on the kids like Mia who now had a space to feel seen. He and Jamie were navigating something new, their relationship a quiet anchor in the chaos. They spent evenings exploring Willow Creek's backroads, talking about everything: Lucas, Ethan's first love, Jamie's years of staying behind, their fears of what came next. One night, under a sky thick with stars, Jamie admitted, "I've loved you since high school. Never said it because I was scared." Ethan's breath caught. He kissed Jamie, slow and sure, the weight of 10 years falling away. But the town's fractures weren't healed. A week after the opening, Someone smashed the memorial plaque, leaving it cracked and defaced with a slur. Ethan found it at dawn, his heart sinking. Jamie was there in minutes, his jaw tight. "We'll fix it," he said, already calling a repair crew. Ethan nodded. But the damage lingered, a reminder that progress wasn't a straight line. Mia rallied her club to respond, organizing a cleanup event. Dozens showed up, kids, parents, even Ryan, the former teammate who'd apologized. They scrubbed the site, repainted walls, and raised money for a new plaque. Ethan watched, humbled, as Mia spoke to the group. "This stadium's ours," she said. "No one gets to ruin it." Her words echoed Ethan's vow from a decade ago, and he felt a spark of hope. The new plaque was installed, this time with added security. Ethan tweaked its wording, making it bolder, for those who were rejected but built anyway. He didn't ask the committee's permission. Some battles were worth fighting without approval. To his surprise, Mayor Tompkins called to say he approved. "It's time we own up to our mistakes," he said. Ethan didn't trust the change entirely, but it was a start. As winter approached, Ethan faced a choice: stay in Willow Creek or return to Chicago. His firm had new projects waiting, skyscrapers that could cement his legacy. But Willow Creek had Jamie, Mia, and a town that was slowly learning. He and Jamie talked it over one night at the auto shop, the air sharp with November chill. "I want you to stay," Jamie said, his voice raw. "But I want you to be happy more." Ethan didn't have an answer yet, but Jamie's words stayed with him. The stadium became a hub, not just for football, but for community events, concerts, fundraisers, even Mia's LGBTQ+ club meetings. Ethan attended one, at Mia's insistence, and was floored by the turnout: 20 kids. Some out, some questioning, all looking for a place to belong. He shared his story, the first time he'd spoken it aloud to a group. The room was quiet, then erupted in applause. A boy in the back, no older than 15, thanked him, his voice shaking. Ethan's eyes stung. Built more than a stadium. Derek's group quieted, their influence waning as the town embraced the stadium's success. But Ethan knew they'd never fully disappear. Hate didn't vanish. It just got quieter. He focused on the wins. The local diner now flew a rainbow flag. And Coach Harlan, though still gruff, had stopped glaring. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Ethan and Jamie's relationship deepened, no longer hidden. They walked through town hand in hand, drawing stares but also smiles. At a Christmas market, a vendor, an older woman who'd once cheered for Ethan, gave them free hot cocoa. "You boys deserve this," she said. Ethan felt the town shifting, not fully but enough to matter. As the year ended, Ethan stood on the stadium's field, Jamie beside him. The lights were off, the stands empty, but the place hummed with possibility. "I think I'm staying," Ethan said, his voice steady. Jamie's grin was brighter than the scoreboard. "Good," he said, pulling Ethan close. "We've got more to build." Ethan's decision to stay in Willow Creek wasn't just about Jamie, it was about finishing what he'd started. The stadium was complete, but its impact was just beginning. He rented a small house on the edge of town, a fixer-upper with creaky floors and a view of the hills. Jamie helped him move in, their laughter filling the empty rooms as they painted walls and unpacked dreams. The stadium became a symbol of change, drawing attention beyond Willow Creek. A national architecture magazine featured Ethan's design, praising its blend of innovation and heart. The article mentioned his past sparingly, but it was enough to spark online chatter. Some called him a hero, others, a troublemaker. Ethan didn't care, he'd built something real, and that was enough. Mia's club grew bolder, hosting a pride event in the stadium's parking lot. Ethan and Jamie helped organize, setting up booths and stringing fairy lights. The turnout surprised them hundreds. From Willow Creek and beyond. Laughing and dancing under a Texas moon. Mia took the stage. Her voice steady now. "This is our town too," she said. And the crowd cheered. Ethan felt Jamie's hand in his. Warm and sure. And knew he'd made the right choice. But not everyone celebrated. Derek and his group crashed the event, shouting slurs from the sidelines. Ethan tensed, ready to confront them. But Mia beat him to it. "You don't get to ruin this," she told Derek, her voice cutting through the noise. Security escorted them out, and the crowd roared louder, reclaiming the night. Ethan watched. Proud, but wary. Hate was stubborn. But so was he. Work kept Ethan busy. He took on local projects, renovating the library, designing a community center. Each one a chance to leave a mark. He and Jamie settled into a rhythm, their lives intertwining. They cooked dinners, argued over paint colors, and stole kisses in the auto shop. But Ethan still carried the weight of his past. One night, he told Jamie about Lucas, the boy he'd loved in high school. "He moved away after I got kicked off the team," Ethan said. "I never saw him again." Jamie listened, then pulled him close. "You're not alone now," he said. The stadium hosted its first non-football event, a charity concert raising funds for queer youth. Ethan and Mia emceed, their banter drawing laughs. The crowd was diverse, a mix of old Willow Creek and new faces, all singing under the stadium's lights. Ethan looked out, seeing the plaque at the entrance, and felt a lump in his throat. This was his legacy, not just steel and concrete, but a space for healing. Coach Harlan's presence at the concert surprised Ethan. The old man approached him afterward, his face softer than Ethan remembered. "I was wrong," Harlan said, his voice gruff. "Didn't see it then, but I do now." Ethan nodded, unsure if he could forgive, but willing to move forward. "Build something better," he told Harlan. The coach nodded, a rare flicker of respect in his eyes. Ethan's firm offered him a promotion, a chance to lead projects in New York. He turned it down, choosing Willow Creek. Chicago had been his escape, but this town was his fight. Jamie supported him, their bond growing stronger. They talked about the future, maybe a family, maybe more projects to change the town. For the first time, Ethan felt rooted, not running. The year ended with a surprise. Mia won a scholarship to an art school in Austin, inspired by Ethan's designs. At her going-away party, held in the stadium, she hugged him tightly. "You showed me I could stay and fight," she said. Ethan's eyes stung. He'd come back to prove a point, but he'd found a purpose. As spring bloomed, Ethan and Jamie stood on the stadium's field, the grass vibrant under their feet. "We did this," Jamie said, his arm around Ethan. Ethan nodded, his heart full. The town wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and they'd keep building. Together. Spring brought new life to Willow Creek, and Ethan felt it in his bones. The stadium was now a cornerstone of the town, hosting games, festivals, and even a weekly farmer's market. Ethan and Jamie were a fixture, their relationship no longer a secret, but a quiet fact of life. Some locals still whispered, but most had moved on, drawn to the stadium's energy and what it meant for their future. Ethan took on more projects, each one a chance to reshape Willow Creek. He designed a park with inclusive playgrounds, ensuring kids of all abilities could play. The town council, once skeptical, now sought his input. Mayor Tompkins even joked about naming a street after him. Ethan laughed it off, but the idea of leaving a permanent mark felt right. Mia's departure for Austin left a void, but she stayed in touch, sending sketches inspired by Ethan's work. Her courage had sparked a ripple effect. More kids came out, and the high school started a diversity council, Ethan spoke at one of their meetings, sharing his story. "You don't have to leave to be yourself," he told them. "But if you do, come back stronger." The kids listened, some teary-eyed, and Ethan felt the weight of his own words. Jamie's auto shop thrived, and he hired a queer teen, Sam, who'd been kicked out by his parents. Ethan and Jamie took him under their wing, offering a couch until he found his footing. "Your family now," Jamie told him, and Ethan saw the boy's shoulders relax for the first time. It reminded Ethan of Jamie's loyalty a decade ago, a debt he could never repay but would spend his life trying to. Derek's group faded, their protests losing steam as the town embraced the stadium's success. But Ethan stayed vigilant. He and Jamie installed security cameras around the stadium, a precaution after the vandalism. One night, they caught a kid barely 16 spray painting the bleachers. Instead of calling the police, Ethan sat him down. "Why?" he asked. The boy, trembling, admitted he was scared of being like Ethan, out and targeted. Ethan shared his story, and by the end, the kid was crying, promising to stop. It wasn't forgiveness, it was understanding. Ethan and Jamie's relationship deepened, built on small moments, fixing the house, watching sunsets, planning a future. One evening, Jamie surprised Ethan with a blueprint, a sketch of a home they could build together, with a studio for Ethan's designs. "I want this with you," Jamie said, his voice steady. Ethan's heart swelled. He said yes, not just to the house, but to a life. The stadium's first anniversary was a town-wide celebration. Ethan and Jamie stood by the plaque, now a landmark. As fireworks lit the sky, Coach Harlan approached, offering a handshake. "You changed this place," he said. Ethan nodded, no longer angry. "We all did," he replied, glancing at Jamie. As the crowd cheered, Ethan felt the past loosen its grip. He'd come back to prove a point, but he'd stayed to build a home. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, but it was trying, and so was he. The second year of the stadium's life marked a turning point for Willow Creek. It wasn't just a venue, it was a heartbeat, pulsing with games, concerts, and stories of a town learning to grow. Ethan and Jamie moved into their new home, a modest ranch house with a studio where Ethan sketched late into the night. The walls were lined with photos, the stadium's opening, Mia's pride event, Sam's first day at the shop. Each was a brick in the life they'd built. Ethan's firm opened a satellite office in Willow Creek, a decision that surprised even him. He hired local talent, including Sam, who showed a knack for drafting. The office took on projects across Texas, each one carrying Ethan's signature, spaces that welcomed everyone. He mentored queer youth, sharing his journey, and found purpose in their hope. Jamie proposed on a quiet summer evening, under the stadium's floodlights. He didn't have a ring, just a nervous grin and a promise. "You're my home," he said, his voice breaking. Ethan said yes, tears in his eyes, and they kissed as the lights flickered above. The town threw them a party, not huge, but heartfelt, with Mia back from Austin to toast their future. Derek's group was a shadow now, their signs gone, their voices drowned out by a town moving forward. Coach Harlan retired, passing the whistle to a younger coach who welcomed Ethan's input. The high school named a scholarship after Ethan, for kids who overcame adversity. He accepted the honor quietly, knowing it was less about him and more about the kids who'd come after. Years later, Ethan stood at the stadium's entrance, gray creeping into his hair. The plaque still stood, its words weathered but clear, for those who were rejected but built anyway. A new generation played on the field, kids who'd never known a Willow Creek without this place. Mia, now an architect herself, visited often, her designs echoing Ethan's vision. Ethan and Jamie grew old together, Their home filled with laughter, art, and Sam's occasional visits. The town wasn't perfect. Hate lingered in corners, but it had learned to listen. Ethan's legacy wasn't just the stadium. It was the courage he'd inspired, the love he'd found, the home he'd built. As he watched a game from the stands, Jamie's hand in his, Ethan thought of the boy he'd been scared, rejected, but defiant. He'd returned, not as a hero, but as a builder. And in building, he'd found peace.